My name is Amanda Waring, and I was recently awarded C.E.S. Teacher of the Year. The following is a speech that I wrote for the Exploring New Ideas Conference for Paraeducators that took place on November 7th. The conference was organized by C.E.S. and Dr. Christine Peck and provided access to meaningful professional development opportunities for paraeducators on a variety of topics. I'm going to read the speech as written. I'm a special education teacher at the Oakview Primary School, one of CES's outplacement special education programs. I work with students who have autism or other developmental or intellectual disabilities and significant language and social emotional challenges. I did my first student teaching placement at CES and returned the following summer as a paraprofessional. I worked as a paraprofessional for the entirety of the following school year before becoming a teacher. This is my 8th year teaching. Some fun facts about me are I love backpacks, fidgets, red pandas, Legos, animal facts, BMX racing, and motocross. I have autism and ADHD. I'm here to talk to you today because Christine asked me to be. I told her I would check my social calendar and get back to her. Shockingly, today was one of the 365 days this year that I have availability. But really, I'm here to share my experiences with you in hopes that it will help you reflect on the students you support and the impact you are able to have on them. I can't and don't want to speak for the experiences of anyone but myself, but I have been a paraprofessional and I have been a student with a disability. I don't know what it's like for everyone, but I know what it's like for me. I know what it's like to struggle with social interaction. My kindergarten report card does not interact with peers written in the comment section. I spent every day at recess in first grade standing against a wall trying to teach myself to tie my shoes. And I was a professional at the Dewey Decimal System because I spent my remaining years in elementary and middle school being a library helper during recess. I spent the majority of my time with adults. Adults are easier than kids. They are usually nicer and they just go along with whatever you say or do. It was much easier to sit with the adults at a birthday party than to play with other kids. Making friends is hard. Learning social skills is hard. Social skills are not like rules. They are not concrete and they change depending on a variety of factors which you have to be able to assess and respond to instantaneously. Sometimes it's okay to do or say something and sometimes it isn't. And sometimes it depends on a person's mood or responses. A lot of people believe that individuals with autism do not have any desire to socially interact with other people, but I don't think that is necessarily true. When you constantly struggle with the complexity of social interactions and you're very rarely successful in any attempt you make to engage with other people, it begins to seem like there's no point in trying. The older I got, the more frustrated I became with the repeated failed attempts I made. I started to believe I just wasn't capable of having friends, but I never stopped wanting them. It just became easier to be by myself than to be constantly rejected by my peers because I didn't understand what I was doing wrong or why they didn't want to be my friend. It didn't occur to me that my third grade peers weren't interested in my fun facts about the history of the United States presidents and they didn't share my interest in reading encyclopedias. I started trying to learn the rules to making friends. I don't know if there are any rules, but I tried to make some. I tried to find things I had in common with people to make friends, but I didn't understand that asking a girl in my 6th grade health class the same question about a TV show she once mentioned she liked every single day wasn't effective until she started sitting across the room. My parents wanted me to join an after-school club in middle school, so I ran for student council and put up posters in the cafeteria I never ate in. But when they announced the results over the loudspeaker, the one vote I got wasn't enough to get me elected. But I was okay with that because I didn't have to make a speech, which really came full circle. By that point, it was pretty deeply ingrained in me that I just needed to try harder and things would get better, so I kept trying. I realized that you couldn't make friends by being alone all the time, so I tried to interact with other people. But sitting next to or following people around without saying anything doesn't really make you many friends. I got good at being alone while being surrounded by other people. I've come a long way socially, and I'd like to think that I'd get at least 2 votes if I ran for student council now, and I'm pretty popular in the playground, but that's probably just because I have the best fidgets. I know what it's like to struggle to communicate. Conversation is hard. Conversational skills, like social skills, lack concrete rules. In addition to the verbal components of conversation, there are also nonverbal components, which are very complicated. I hate making eye contact. It's complicated and it feels unnatural and uncomfortable. I have to focus all my attention in order to make eye contact, which makes it impossible for me to focus on what the person I'm talking to is saying. Looking at people's eyes doesn't really tell me anything either, because I really can't tell how someone is feeling or what their intentions are by looking at their eyes. Eye contact is hard because there are a lot of factors involved. How long do you make eye contact for? Where do you look when you aren't making eye contact? When do you make eye contact? Are you supposed to look for 5 seconds, then not look for 5 seconds, and look for 5 seconds? Are the rules always the same, or do they change based on the situation? I can make eye contact if I really have to because I've learned to look at people's nose. I've also learned that when you're having a conversation with someone and they say your name in the middle of it, they probably want you to look at them. Body language is another form of nonverbal communication that is very difficult for me to understand. It's hard for me to focus on and process what people are saying and doing at the same time. When I talk to someone and someone else asks me how they were feeling about the topic of conversation, I can't usually tell. I can repeat what they said, but I can't gauge how they were feeling unless they were yelling or crying. I also have a hard time initiating conversations and knowing when conversations are over. My most successful method of initiating conversations is standing in close proximity to the person I need to talk to until they realize I'm standing there. I can never tell when conversations are over unless they end with the other person saying bye. Most of the time I don't know what to do, so I just wait for the other person to stop talking, and then I count to 10 in my head and walk away. And if you're starting to wonder if I'm qualified to teach my autistic students social skills, I can assure you that I am not, but my paraprofessionals have that under control. In addition to all the nonverbal components of conversation, the verbal components are challenging for me, which has always been very frustrating. Oftentimes people think that individuals on the autism spectrum don't have anything to say, don't want to communicate, or don't have thoughts, opinions, or preferences just because they may be unable to verbally express them. Countless times growing up, I was told to use my words, and I always found that incredibly frustrating because at the times people would say that to me, I didn't have the words to say what I needed. I didn't have the words I needed to say what I wanted to say. Every single day I have thoughts and opinions and preferences that I struggle to verbally express because I can't find the words. I can see what I'm trying to say in my head, and sometimes I wish everyone else could see it too, because when I try to explain it in words, it's like my thoughts go too fast and I can't slow them down and put them in order to express them. I just feel like pointing to the picture in my head and saying that, but I can't. So I say I don't know over and over until whoever I'm talking to loses interest, I could find the words, or I give up. I know what it's like to struggle, but I also know what it's like to succeed. I am where I am and who I am because of the people who believed in me, the people who supported me, and the people who never let me give up on myself. The people who have had the biggest impact on me have been the people who tried to understand me instead of trying to change me, the people who didn't view me as broken, the people who believed in me before I believed in myself, and the people who saw the potential I didn't know I had. There weren't many, but they mattered. Those 5 or so people matter more than the thousands of others I've encountered over the last 31 years. I started working at Staples right after I turned 17, and I worked there for 12 years after that, through high school, college, grad school, and my first few years as a teacher on nights and weekends. I met one of my people there. My manager, Sandra, was one of the first people who ever tried to understand me, who treated me like I was smart, who made me feel like I didn't have to prove it. I was hardworking and I'd do whatever you asked me to do, but I needed direction sometimes. Understanding is subtle, it's nuance. When she asked me to go break down one of the pallets in receiving and walked in 15 minutes later and found me pacing around the pallets, it was a difference between making the assumption that I was messing around on my phone for the last 15 minutes and knowing that I just didn't know where to start. Understanding is simple. It's just pointing out the pallet you want me to start with because it's too overwhelming for me to choose when there are 12. Understanding is also knowing that she messed up when she taught me how to make corrections in the inventory system, because I couldn't help but to notice that the system says we have 352 boxes of crayons and I counted 348 became a way too regular thing. After all these years, Sandra and I are still close, and I will never forget how she became one of my people and the impact she has had on me. I've always struggled with feeling like I have to constantly prove to people that I'm not dumb, that I have thoughts that I can't always articulate at the right time to the right people, that I'm listening, that I understand, and that I'm paying attention. Okay, that's a stretch because there's a good chance that I am in fact not paying attention. I've always felt the need to prove myself to people, not because I want their approval, not because I want them to like me, not because I want everyone to know how smart I am, but because, like the other 8.2 billion people on Earth, I had the fundamental desire to be understood. Everyone, regardless of how significantly impacted they may be by a disability, regardless of how socially aware they appear to be, regardless of how much you think they may care, wants to be understood. The most impactful thing you can do for another human being is make an effort to understand them, to understand their perspective, understand their likes and dislikes, understand their strengths, understand their challenges, and understand the why, because there's always a reason. When you make an effort to understand someone, you are showing them that they are worthwhile, that you believe they are capable, that they have value, and that you care about them. Many of us work with kids who engage in behaviors, defiant behaviors, aggressive behaviors, avoidance behaviors, escape behaviors, disruptive behaviors. But why? Because many of us work with kids who struggle with anxiety, with trauma, with needs, wants, thoughts, and preferences, and fears that they can't communicate. We work with kids who struggle with the itchy tag and the squeaky marker and the smelly cafeteria broccoli. Our students are doing the best they can. We are doing the best we can. By making an effort to understand our students, presuming competence in them, and believing that they are doing the best they can in any given situation, we can build trusting relationships with them that will allow us to help them reach their highest potential. This requires us to shift our perspective and challenge what we thought we knew. It requires us to ask ourselves why. We have to be willing to be wrong. We have to care more about what caused the child to engage in the behavior and or what message the child's trying to communicate by engaging in the behavior than the behavior itself. And to do that, we have to understand or be willing to try to. I'll never forget the day I was on the playground with my students and another class. One of my students walked up to a girl in another class and asked her to play. The student he approached was not quite as socially aware as he was and didn't acknowledge him at all. He followed her and asked again. She didn't acknowledge him. He walked away, walked towards myself and a few other staff members, kicked the fence, and said, "My birthday is ruined." I had just started working with this student, and I hadn't heard him say that before, but some of the adults who had known him longer immediately responded, "He always says that. He wanted some Minecraft sword for his birthday, and he didn't get it, and he talks about it all the time. He just won't get over it." But he wasn't talking about the sword. He was telling you he felt disappointed in the only way he knew how. He couldn't identify that feeling, and if he could, he didn't know how to label it. But he knew when he felt the same when he was ignored. But he knew he felt the same way when he was ignored by the girl he wanted to play with as he did when he didn't get the present he wanted. He was doing his best, and they were doing their best. When we try to understand, we can better support him. We can model the language for him. I feel disappointed. We could talk about it. Sometimes I feel disappointed when I don't get what I want, or when someone doesn't want to play with me, or when I run out of dino nuggets, because that's the worst. His best got better, our best got better, and he felt understood. We have to understand that it's very rarely he's lazy, he doesn't want to do it, he wants to toy, he thinks it's funny, he doesn't care about anything, or he's just a jerk. Sometimes, sure, because we're all human, but always, never. We miss out on so many underlying challenges, unsupported needs, and potential assuming that. If we assume that our students are doing the best they can, try to understand their perspective, and presume competence, we'll find there's so much more. A few years ago, I had a student who almost always had a meltdown while transitioning from play to breakfast in the morning. While dysregulated, he would often yell, "I don't like when fun things end," or "I don't want to clean up," usually with some very colorful language sprinkled in, which seemingly confirmed what we had initially thought. He was upset that a preferred activity was ending. We did find it interesting that he still had such significant difficulty with this particular transition because he had made significant progress with other preferred activities ending, including playground and play before dismissal. He also didn't have a meltdown every time. Once in a while, he would just clean up when the timer went off, no problem at all. We talked about it as a classroom team a few times, trying to figure out what may help, and one of my paraprofessionals mentioned that it seemed like the days he transitioned without difficulty, one of his peers was at OT. That was it. It was the peer, the loud peer. He hates loud. He cannot tolerate it. He is genuinely pained by unexpected noise. It wasn't about cleaning up the toys. It wasn't about play ending. He was using the language we modeled for him, but what he really meant was, "I feel safe when I'm away from the group, playing at my work desk, and rejoining the group where there's a potential for loud, unexpected noises in close proximity to me makes me very anxious." We started taking his peer for a walk 1 minute prior to the transition and returning to the classroom 1 minute after the transition was finished. The student never had another meltdown during the transition from play to breakfast. He was doing his best. We were doing our best. We collaborate, we try to understand, and we can better support him. We modeled the language. "I feel nervous to go back to the group. Sometimes my friends are loud." We reassured him. We promised him if friends were loud, he could leave the classroom. We followed through, always. His best got better, our best got better, and he felt understood. The next most impactful thing you can do after understanding the weird kid is embracing the weird kid. Feeling understood and having shared or valued interests is the foundation of friendship, I think. Friendship is an abstract concept, one that I Googled. Google so helpfully defines friendship as the emotions or conduct of friends, the state of being friends, and a state of mutual trust and support between allied nations. I refined my search to friend, a person who knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection, which was also unhelpful. What I'm trying to say is that people like to share their interests with others or feel like others value their interests. I believe all people have this desire. We just have to shift our perspective and try to better understand so we can help our students experience this. This year, my program moved to a new building, directly across the street from our old building. Our first day of school would be the first day our students had ever been in the new building, and it would also be their first day with their new teachers, paraprofessionals, and peers. It was a big day for everyone. I was keeping one student from the previous 2 years and getting 3 new students transitioning from another classroom in our program. I asked my new students' previous teachers what their favorite things were, what they were obsessed with, what they loved and never stopped talking about. Turns out that one of my 7-year-old students really loves human anatomy, especially organs. I've come to find that he is incredibly knowledgeable. As a result, I was standing outside the new building on the first day of school waiting for his bus to pull up, little plastic spleen from Temu in hand to greet him. Because nothing says, hey, I know you've been home for 3 weeks and have now returned to a new building to be greeted by someone who's virtually a stranger to take you to your new classroom, but here's a spleen. I hope it helps. It did help. He smiled and took my hand. Was it the spleen? No, it wasn't. He handled the transition like a champ all on his own, but I would like to think that the spleen showed him that I'm interested in the things he likes, that I'm interested in him, that I want to understand him. Maybe the kid who's obsessed with MapQuest and just stims on Google Earth on his tablet all day and doesn't have any play skills and just throws all the toys, doesn't want to play with the ball popper or play chutes and ladders or build Legos. I knew that kid. He loved to play. He had great play skills. We printed out street signs for him and glued them to popsicle sticks. He used Play-Doh to make them stand up. He lined them up and pretended to drive by them. He did the same with billboards. The electronic billboards, he taped those on top of each other in the order they appeared and flipped through them. Line up the cars. Sort the game pieces by color. Watch the same 3 seconds of the video over and over. Look at the appliance logos. Draw fire alarms. Do it differently and do it to understand. Do it for the kid who's non-speaking, the one they say doesn't play, who's in his own world. Do it for the way he looks at you when you play the song he hums under his breath on your phone, even if only for a second, before his eyes glare at the phone playing the song he didn't realize you heard him humming. He'll look at you and know that you care enough about him, you value him enough to listen to him, to understand him, and to be interested in him. There's an autism page on Reddit, and every once in a while someone starts a thread where they post their kids' unusual interests or hyperfixations and different things they've done related to it, and it's my absolute favorite thing on the internet. It never fails to make me smile. The mom whose 3-year-old son loves washers and dryers and had his birthday party at a laundromat. The dad that takes his son to the parks with the best power line viewing opportunities. The family who dressed up as a toilet plunger, toilet brush, and toilet at their toilet-obsessed son's request. The 9-year-old with 7 microwaves. The 12-year-old with the emotional support spork. I love it. I love weird, I love different, and I love the genuine joy that it brings. One of my undergraduate professors asked me how I was going to teach if I couldn't talk. I somehow managed to almost fail my first fieldwork placement. Another professor once gave me a 0 on an interpersonal skills evaluation, out of 100. I never believed I could be a teacher. I majored in education because my parents suggested it and I didn't know what else I was going to do. I truly couldn't imagine myself being successful in an interview, let alone talking to parents, presenting in PPTs, making phone calls, or leading a team. I'm not sure that I'm supposed to be here, and I know it wasn't easy to get here, but I'm fighting to stay here. It never stops being hard, it never stops being uncomfortable, and it never stops being exhausting, but it never stops being worth it either. I'm here because of my people, because of the people who worked so hard to understand me, the people who thought I was worth trying to understand, the people who showed me that I have value, the people who believed in me before I believed in myself, the people who never spoke for me, the people who treated me like I was smart without having to prove it, the people who never did anything for me but taught me to do it on my own. You have the power to be those people. You are those people. What you do is important and who you are is important. Be the person that understands, that accepts, that believes, that advocates, that celebrates, and that supports. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. I'd also like to thank my people who helped me write this speech, who sat and listened to me stutter through my scattered thoughts and wrote down my partial and run-on sentences while I rambled. To my people who proofread, practiced, pep talked, and talked me off the ledge. But most importantly, thank you for the work you do for your students. It matters, and you matter.